Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Tuesday, January 6, 2026. So got to make sure I get that right. Today is King's Day, so for all those who celebrate Kings, happy King's Day. King's cakes are very famous in the United States. If you're ever in New Orleans, they have King's cake because this is a Latin tradition, whether Spanish or French. So if you're into these kind of events, certainly head on out to a Mexican or Hispanic store, and they may have a King's cake available that you can get, and they are pretty good. It's a tradition, so for those who celebrate the tradition, you just got to have the cake. Some people bake them at home, some people buy them. Anyway, if you're in New Orleans, the King's cakes are really decorated out, really spectacularly. So it's certainly something to participate in. The day is still kind of young, and there may still be a few King's cakes out there. So anyway, we're going to get to the heart of the video now, which is the Kupiansk area. And the Kupiansk area is covered by the fog of war. So that means no one really knows exactly where the Russians are and where the Ukrainians are. And this is because Russia advanced, Ukraine counterattacked. The front line is shifting this way, shifting that way. And we see that there are Ukrainian advances into areas that some consider to be Russian controlled, and Russians are advancing into areas that some consider Ukrainian controlled. So that is the fog of war. And I did get one comment from someone about one of my videos on Kupiansk saying that it's all just bull that I was saying. Well, the point is that, military strategy is part just, deception, counterfeit, fake. That is all part of the military strategy, because you want the opponents to focus on the area where you're strongest, and you want them to mass their forces and try to go against your defensive line while you are going through their flanks and cutting off their supply and retreat, as well as boxing in the opposing military. So the fact that we don't know exactly where the front line goes in Kupiansk is nothing to stress about or worry about. And certainly those who study this and use maps to try to analyze this situation aren't here to deceive people or just make up a story. This is the reality. We have the Ukrainian or pro-Ukrainian mappers. We have the neutral mappers. We have the pro-Russian mappers. So anyway, we have maps, and they're all saying different things. And the fact that things aren't all just, clean cut, isn't something to stress over or worry about. It's simply a part of the whole media campaign that both sides are running, and then the neutral mapper tries to use geolocations to figure out the real front line, but many times the information comes out 2 days, 3 days, a week later. So sometimes you just don't know where the front line is. And nothing could be more accurate than this whole Kupiansk area, because we have deep state, which is basically telling us that Ukraine has taken most, if not all, of Kupiansk, with a couple of pockets of Russians here left, and kind of an area where the Russians, a gray area where the Russians still may be located. But basically they've reduced the pockets of Russians down to 3 pockets, not very large pockets. So for the Ukrainians, this is the moment of victory. And we will see from other mappers, they're not so sure that the Ukrainians have made such great advances. But the fact is that Deep State tends to favor a pro-Ukrainian narrative and is even used by U.S. military to indicate the situation on the front lines. So, of course, they're going to put out a narrative that is very favorable to the Ukrainians. Now, if we go to AMK mapping, they have a little bit of a different story here. So, move this out of the way. And that call came in and left. So, anyway, we'll continue with the video. So we have Kupiansk, and you can see that the Russians have the northern part of Kupiansk and are surrounded in the southern part of Kupiansk. This is according to AMK mapping, and this blue geometrical shape, polygon 5 in this map, is where the Ukrainians have made recent advances. But if you look down here, there really isn't much where the Ukrainians could... you have kind of a bridge here. We have some swampy areas. This is all flat. So any Ukrainian soldiers standing out here, even under the trees, could be, easy pickings for the drone operators. Of course, here we have more of a substantially fortified area where the Ukrainians could be located. So anyway, we have supposedly the Ukrainians have made recent advances in this area. It kind of looks like an industrial area. So they've established themselves in some of those buildings. This is according to AMK mapping. But basically, if you can see, the shape of the Russians are still the same as has been seen for a while, with the kind of a half circle form, starting in Kupiansk and ending in Kolishnikivka. So anyway, we have this area that apparently the Ukrainians still control, and so that is AMK mapping. Now, if we go to Calibrated, another mapping service, and they try to do their best as well to give us the most accurate picture. Now, here we have from Calibrated, we have the Russians basically controlling a good portion of Kupiansk, and the Ukrainians controlling western Kupiansk. So, and also the Russians basically maintain their a straight line north of Kupiansk to Doroshivka. So anyway, the Russians basically maintain themselves pretty well in Kupiansk. And you have to remember that the Ukrainians gathered some of their best forces to try to dislodge the Russians from Kupiansk. And so their success, I really have to say, has been quite limited, considering the forces that they brought to this area, and the expectation that they were going to push the Russians back substantially from Kupiansk. It looks like the Russians are holding on here quite well, according to Calibrated. Of course, like I say, this whole area is covered with the fog of war. No one really has a good idea of where the front line is. Now, if we go to Military Summary Channel, we have some recent geolocated advances of the Russian forces, along with some Ukrainian advances, according to a military summary. Again, the Russians have the northern part of Kupiansk, and recently they were geolocated in this Podoli area, and also Kurilivka. So something is going on there that we still don't understand very well exactly where the lines run. No one can say, oh, the Russians have withstood the the efforts of the Ukrainians to push them back and are now retaking lost territory. That could possibly be the case, but anyway, what we can say is that the Russians have withstood basically 1 month of an onslaught from the Ukrainians to try to dislodge them from Kupiansk. And of course, the Russian Ministry of Defense was not ceding ground, at least in their reports, not stating that they were being pushed back, that the Ukrainians were winning. And so again, you have to admit that, with the fog of war, part of what the Russians, I believe, were trying to do was to encourage the Ukrainians to continue to send troops to this area, because there were more important parts of the front line where the Russians were doing well and wanted to continue to advance. And this was the hook and worm to try to bring the fish over to the Kupiansk area. And so you can see, according to military summary, it's still unclear exactly where the Russians are, where the Ukrainians are, but the Russians, again, in this map, have withstood and maintained a strong presence in Kupiansk, and now appear to be retaking this lost territory. So that's what it appears to be, but of course, you can't say yes or no. It's really hard to say exactly where the front lines are. So if this is the best that the Ukrainians could do to try to push the Russians out, they've spent a month at this, and they have been, I would have to say, unsuccessful if you judge it from this map. Now I found something very curious. So I'm gonna zoom out slightly here. So here is the current position of the Russians. Now if we go to the deep state map and go back to December of 2025. So we go to December 2025 and to the 10th of December. This was, according to Deep State, when the Ukrainian counter-offensive occurred, and they pushed the Russians out of the Kupiansk area. Now, if we match up this map here of Kupiansk with the current, I can't really put it side by side, but if you can see how the map is here in the Kupiansk area, according to Deep State, where the Russians were on December 10th, 2025, and where military summary says we are today, you get I go back here, we get this area that comes right into basically the center of Kupiansk, where all the roads meet. And if we go back here, again, this, I don't know how this matches up exactly, but you can see that okay, so it doesn't exactly match up, but the maps are very similar. The 10th of December 2025 Deep State, and today, January 6, 2026. So there are some similarities between the two maps. Now the question is, were the Russians ever pushed out of this formation to start off? Were they pushed out? Were they always there? Did they just simply withstand the Ukrainian counteroffensive, or did they get pushed back and then return? So basically, this is here we have Sinkivka. Let's check Sinkivka. Okay, I have Sinkivka. So you can see it doesn't exactly match up. We have Kindrashivka. Let's go over to Kindrashivka. Here's Kindrashivka, Radkivka. So we go over here and we have Radkivka. So there are some odd similarities between the deep state map, December 10th, 2025, and the military summary map from January 6, 2026. I would venture a guess that the Russians were pushed back some, but basically maintained their shape. So, I mean, because this looks way too similar. Of course, you have some advances here of the Russian forces coming from Sinkivka, so it doesn't quite match up. But anyway, the fact that the shape is quite similar, it seems to me that if you judge these maps from December 10th, 2025 on the deep state and January 6th on the military summary map, you will find several similarities which are just really which seem to be more than just a coincidence. So, did the Russians simply maintain themselves in place and fight off the Ukrainians, or were they forced to leave and then they came back into this area? And of course, if you base it off one of these other maps, like AMK, this is a totally different scenario. Here we basically have the Russians being pushed out of most of Kupiansk. But, for me, this is quite a strange similarity, and I thought I'd point that out. So, anyway, again, this is a situation that's being covered by the fog of war. We won't really know until Russians or Ukrainians begin to transmit clear geolocations that are recent videos and not ones that are, we have videos being presented with no snow, and this area now has a lot of snow. So anyway, these old videos give us some idea of where things gone in the past, but doesn't give us a clear idea of where things are currently. So anyway, I thought I would just point that out to you in Kupiansk. So the conclusion of this video is that the Ukrainians counterattacked, the Russians withstood, and now seem to be retaking lost territory. And not only that, they seem to be closing out part of this Kupiansk cauldron that was formed between Kupiansk and Kurilivka. So according to military summary, the Russians are now closing out this area and are stabilizing this front line. That would make sense for them to try to break this up into two chunks. These are really large territories. So if this is what Russia is doing, then it'll first clear out this northern cauldron and then form a completely new cauldron between Korilivka and Kolesnivkivka. So anyway, take things for what they're worth. It's hard to say exactly where the front lines are, what is going on, but these different maps paint different stories, and that's what I'm here to tell. So anyway, if you've stayed until this point in the video, thank you for joining me today. Wish you wish you the very best. And again, if you're going to go celebrate King's Day, you have to hurry to get a King's cake before the day is over. So anyway, If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.